All right, welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA Mondays. I am here with a very special guest in Renee Washington. She comes with quite the resume, so I'm going to go ahead and let her plug in whatever it is that she wants to tell you guys about herself. But thank you for joining the show, Renee, and welcome.
Scotty, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing a little bit of everything. So I work with the Philadelphia Union as their game day broadcaster. I work with Fox Sports covering the Wizards and Mystics and hosting my show Beyond the Headlines. And then with ESPN covering college athletics, Ivy League, Temple University, different college athletics in the area. So some of the many hats that I wear. But yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah. And you hit on everything that I've, read about you, everything that I've discovered about you over the last couple months. Obviously I'm very happy to have you on the show. You obviously know yourself, you know your way around the sports world. And obviously that's why I wanted to get you on here to talk some sports. I also saw in your bio, you're a three-time All-American, and this was at LaSalle. That's awesome. Obviously, You have ties to, like the Philly, New Jersey area. So I was wondering if you could just maybe tie in some of that to, your background as far as, being from the area, or at least, competing in the area.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up playing all sports, but was primarily a soccer player. I did have an opportunity to play at LaSalle University. And as you mentioned, I was a three-time All-American. It was an incredible experience having been a part of a lot of firsts. So individually and collectively as a team, reaching our first ever NCAA tournament, winning our first ever conference tournaments. We were actually ranked in the top 20 in the country when I was there. I was ranked as a player as well. So it was a great experience being able to be a part of Philly soccer, a part of LaSalle. I am born and raised in New Jersey. I'm still in New Jersey. And so also just having a chance to play in the area that I grew up. So playing against a lot of former teammates and coaches that I grew up knowing, and also having a chance to be still local in that sense. And now having the opportunity to work in sports in the area is just as fulfilling, because I'm still able to be a part of some of the same coaches, storylines, and things that I remember playing against. So it's kind of like a full circle moment. Definitely thankful for all that this area has brought for me as an athlete, and even having played some professional soccer. And a lot of what I do is because of this area, being in the greater Philadelphia, New Jersey area. So it's nothing but love and excitement being able to be a part of the Philly sports scene.
Yeah. And I think you hit it right on the head there. And that's why it's awesome to have you. As my show is Philly centric, you see with the background, everything. I do love. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I do want to cover the whole NBA, but at the end of the day, I am a Philly guy. I love to cover Philly sports. And it's awesome to have somebody who's, toed in, homegrown almost, New Jersey's right around the corner. So,
literally the bridge.
Exactly. So happy to have you on the show. We'll dive right in right here, right now. Thoughts on the Super Bowl to start off. We won't spend too much time on football, but what were your thoughts just generally from the Super Bowl performance yesterday?
Can I have my money back from that free virtual experience that I watched? I'm a little disappointed, to be honest. I think for me, the biggest thing is, especially if my team is not in a championship for any league, I just want to see a competitive game. I just want to see down to the wire finishes where you don't know who's going to win it. And I've been saying this, but the most exciting Super Bowl we've had, 2018, when the Eagles beat the Patriots, because of the fact that regardless if you were a fan of the Eagles or the Patriots or neither, the game was exciting. It was awesome football. There were big, crazy plays. There were no calls that were changing the game. There were played so well, and you really did not know who was going to win. So I hate the fact that yesterday or Sunday night, as we're watching the Super Bowl, you knew the game was over after the first quarter. It was bad football. The Chiefs played terrible. I got to give congrats to, of course, Tampa Bay for playing so well. Their defense was lights out.
Yeah.
You can't even fully give them that credit without wondering some of those flags and penalties that we saw. the fact that for some odd reason no Chiefs player could catch the ball, not one. How many times did we watch the ball go through guys' hands, hitting them in the helmet, hitting them in the shoulder? I mean, it was bad, and it almost got to the point it looked rigged, which I hate to say. It honestly felt like it was staged. It didn't seem real. The Chiefs of all team to be held to 9 points, to have the terrible game that they did, it was not fun whatsoever. Yeah, it's a shame after a great season of being able to work through COVID to then turn around and have an average Super Bowl. But if you're a Tom Brady or Tampa Bay fan, you're happy. For everyone else, we're just very disappointed.
Yeah. And I think you hit some key points there. Just not very entertaining. And, you start out the gate, these guys go, 3 and out the first 2 possessions back to back. And then you finally see Tampa Bay sort of break through with a couple flags, that gets them basically down to the goal line. And, obviously Gronk, he had a game, he had a pretty good game there. But you mentioned the defense. Really, I guess the issue comes in when you don't have it, you're not getting it called both ways. And you're letting the Buccaneers play physical in the defensive end. You're letting them rough up the receivers and tight ends. But then you go to the other side and you're calling these kind of tic-tac fouls for the Buccaneers. So, yeah, it did get to the point where you're just like, come on, Wow. And then the offensive line for the Chiefs, I mean, that was just getting torn apart. And to be honest, that was the most bland I've ever seen the Chiefs offense look. You mentioned the receivers not catching the ball. I don't even know what kind of offense they were running. That is not their normal offense. Usually you see, Tyreek Hill in space, Travis Kelce in space. And, kudos to the Bucs. They did stick with those guys, but you got to look for other outlets of offense when that's happening.
It just did not make sense. I think had this been a team, and I think even like the Rams-Patriots Super Bowl, which was not exciting either since it was such a low-scoring game, you kind of expected that, though, because the Rams coming in with a very young Sean McVay and a team that was kind of on the Cinderella run wasn't expected to do much. But for the Chiefs, with their high-powered offense we've seen the last few years, to then have them have that sort of performance, and I agree, their offense was like, you look at, there were times where I actually saw a player running and nobody was even trying to block. They just stopped and were watching. It was very odd. It was a really weird game. It was actually very similar to the halftime show, where it was very weird, where I was like, what am I watching here? What is going on? This doesn't seem real. Like, I feel like I'm on like I'm not watching. I'm like, I don't know. It just didn't seem real at all.
That's what I was going to ask you about next, was that the weekend halftime show, got mixed, but mostly negative reviews, I would say. How, overall, you mentioned you couldn't tell if it was reality or not. Were you disappointed? What did you expect from the weekend? Are you a weekend fan? How did you feel going into it, I guess I should ask?
Well, I like the Weeknd's music. I'm a big fan of the Weeknd. Social media is hilarious. People were like, it's the weekend, but it feels like I wish it was Monday. Like, people were making all these jokes like, this is who was booked. Nobody else is available. It was like a lot of really funny jokes, some inappropriate that I won't say. But I think the confusing thing was, I actually know someone that was dancing, that was one of the dancers. My cousin was actually one of the dancers.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, great. Let me look for him. Yeah, no, not happening.
You're not going to find him.
I'm like, he's the guy in the red jacket with the face mask, the mask on. I mean, it's just, that was odd. I understand the Weeknd's not a performer, and I think that's something people have to keep in mind. Not every good artist is a good performer. And that definitely was a very odd performance. It was a little demonic at times. It was a little confusing. It felt like we were on like a trip. Like we were like drugged out or something. Like there was a lot going on. I didn't know this. And I'm like, for his music and for the performance, I didn't really feel any connection there. It was just odd, but it actually was right on point with the rest of the game, because as we were talking about before, the game, I just can't get over Gronk's first touchdown was legitimate. Very good touchdown. The next touchdown he had came off of what was a field goal that got called back offsides. They get a touch. Like, they actually gave them points. Then the next touchdown AB got, the defense had to stop and then somehow turn the ball. I mean, I don't even know if I have this correct, actually, because the sequence of events did not make sense. They couldn't punt the ball. They couldn't get a stop. They would get a stop and then get a penalty and give it right back. It was just
it kept happening.
Those 2 touchdowns were so odd because I'm like, they actually had the ball. It was kind of like, oh wait, oops, we weren't supposed to get the ball. Here, go score.
Right.
I mean, it did not make sense. And again, the offense and the deep, both sides of the ball, even the special teams, the fact that they couldn't even punt the ball. The second punt goes 30 yards, a 40-yard difference. It just felt so fake. And I hate to say that. As a sports fan, you don't want to say that, but it felt very staged. And we didn't see Patrick Mahomes until the last 4 minutes of the game. So
yeah, literally. And it's kind of weird that, and you point that out because the whole game, I'm just like, okay, the Chiefs aren't out of it yet. They have a high power offense. Right. They're going to come back. They're going to make it a game. And you just never saw it happen. I mean, the Chiefs couldn't even get into the end zone. I mean, it was very surreal and odd. You mentioned the halftime performance. Likewise, surreal and odd. Me and my girlfriend, we're huge Weeknd fans. And we're just sitting there like, man, he really did a disservice to, one, his music, and then two, just the halftime performance and what it's supposed to be.
What are the bandages? I've tried to Google. I can't get into reading it. That's partly my fault. I am so confused. This whole plastic surgery, the bandages, it's supposed to have a connection to some experience he had, or I don't know.
I don't know. It's like the whole, I know that he has the music video where he's in a car accident, and I don't get it. I don't know what story he's trying to tell. I haven't dug into it that far, but, definitely the bandages on the face definitely reminds me of a Miami doctor, plastic surgery,
facial Jackson vibes as to where we're going with this. Because I was reading something it's supposed to be his way of telling a story of, apparently he was in an accident, which I haven't dug enough to know because I'm like, I don't know if I really want to know. Apparently it's supposed to correlate to some personal experiences he had, but it just is giving me Michael Jackson vibes, almost like a cry for help. Like there's something going on there that we're missing. Because the images that came out of him with the whatever he got done to his face, I'm like, whoa, the alarm is sounding.
What's going on here? And you mentioned the Michael Jackson vibe. I mean, he had on the red coat. He was doing the little feet movements, but he wasn't dancing. So, it was odd overall. And I just think you mentioned it. The Weeknd, I don't think he's built for halftime of the Super Bowl. I mean, you got to be built for that. You got to be a performer. I just didn't think that he brought that. But we won't spend too much more time on that. We'll dive into some NBA topics now. Obviously, I know you cover the Wizards, the Mystics, in that Washington, D.C. area. What is the feel with the Wizards right now? I know you have your own podcast that you run covering, that side of things. What is the feel, when you got a young budding star, in his prime like Bradley Beal, something that you can build around, but you're just in the middle of what seems to be an overall team decline as you look from, it was 2017, you're one game away from the Eastern Conference Finals. Then 2018, you're outed by the Raptors in the first round. 2019, 2020, you don't make the playoffs. And here we are now. What do you feel is the motive going forward? What do you have to build on? What are you trying to do there in Washington?
Yeah, it's really a shame. It's really a shame because I think back to the news of hearing that John Wall and Russell Westbrook are going to be traded and the excitement around that and the optimism around that to just how fast that turned around. And it's no knock on Westbrook because I don't think it's anything to do with him fully. I know people will point the finger at him. But I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing is this team is still a few pieces away. They're still not there yet. I know Bradley Beal has adamantly said that he doesn't want to be moved. He wants to stay in D.C. We also have the same thing about John Wall, and he's in Houston right now. So I don't fully know how much we can believe that. We hear players say that a lot, that they don't want to be moved, and then we later hear them put in for a trade, or they just get traded. So I would imagine, to be honest, regardless how he's feeling, I don't see them, if they're not able to pick things up this year, to at least be a team that's a playoff team, a comfortably 500 team. bet higher up in the standings. I don't see him staying. I mean, to have the stretch that they did, it took them forever to finally get a win. Then they came into the new year. They get 2 back-to-back wins. There's a little optimism there. Then they're losing again. I mean, 5 wins. 5 wins coming into Monday.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's bad. And at the end of the day, this team is dealing with, there's at the point now where anything that can go wrong kind of is going wrong. So you had the COVID outbreak, so they had to miss a bunch of games. Then you have injuries. Then you have the players that you do have, the supporting cast around Rui Hachimura and Davis Bertans and those players, they're in and out. There's no continuity. So it's by no surprise that they are struggling in that sense, because they already had a lot of pieces coming in that had to take time to come together. Then they're not able to practice. They're not able to have enough of the players fully there consistently. And this is the result. So I think, something that they have said that sticks with me is that they do realize that, it does take time to build chemistry. Most players don't come into a new team and go right in and win a championship like we just saw Tom Brady do.
Right.
For most teams, it takes them time to gel. It takes them time to figure each other out. And that's something that has been said from the coaching staff all the way through, that they understand this process that they're in right now. I do think they have a positive future in what Russell Westbrook can bring to bring triple doubles, getting rebounds, getting steals, getting assists along with points. You kind of need that from one of your top players on this team, especially. Losing Thomas Bryant to a torn ACL was a hit, but then you see players like Robin Lopez is doing well, and they're figuring it out. So I think that the hard part is, for Bradley Beal specifically, is I don't think you have time to really waste with him. Benefit though, and I know we'll get into this, is that he at least is finally getting the accolades he deserves. So I felt like you can't be on a losing team and not get the All-Star spot and not get an All-NBA team. Something's got to give. So at least the fact that he's in the conversation for being on the All-Star team, and also I'm sure he'll be an All-NBA player, being that he just broke Michael Jordan's 25 points per game streak and is now doing monumental things. That's at least a positive that hopefully will keep him content, but something's got to change, and fast.
Yeah. And you hit some key points there once again. I think the main point you hit there was, those accolades that he's, it's seeming like he's going to receive these accolades this season. He's leading the league in scoring right now. You mentioned the records that he's breaking. He's a machine when it comes to scoring the basketball and just propelling his team. It's weird that it hasn't, taken them to into a winning culture, but I think he is also kind of going through that. John Wall was a monumental piece to the organization. And I think, Bradley Beal is probably suffering from a little bit of just not having that guy that has always been there. And now he is the veteran on the Washington Wizards. He's the guy that's been there. And, you're trying to implement Russell Westbrook, who I think is still a great player. That was kind of my next question to you. How do they view Russell Westbrook in the future? Is it a situation where if they're selling and they're going to sell, Beal and Westbrook, or is Westbrook kind of, a piece that they see a future with there?
It seems like they really are sold on Westbrook for what he brings on and off the floor. I think back to, I'm trying to think what game it was. It was one of the last games of 2020 that they had where they lost, and Westbrook was just sitting there emotional after the game on the bench, and his head was down. And head coach Scott Brooks was saying just how much you could feel the emotion he had put into the game, resonate with everybody else. Here was a man who you could see openly gave his all, was openly disappointed, and felt like he had in some way let the team down. And also the fact that he brings a different level in terms of his training, his weightlifting, off court nutrition and training and mindset. I think that's what this team needs. In my opinion, for a team to be successful in the NBA, you have to not only have 2 all-star players, at least, with a strong supporting cast, but you have to have veteran, experienced players that know what it takes throughout the length of a season to stay healthy, to stay mentally fresh, to be in big games, to win a best of 7 series. And I think for the Wizards, because they've had so many injuries with John Wall and Beal over the years. Those are the two you're trying to build around, but those are the two who were not up on the floor. So I think that for Westbrook, similar to what like LeBron is doing in LA with like Anthony Davis and KCP and the young players around him, THT, you need someone that's going to be the voice, the player that's going to be the voice, that's going to get the respect of his teammates. It's going to help them understand how to be more mature, how to train, how to work, how to make, take care of their bodies. So I think they're really sold on what Westbrook brings because they haven't had that. John Wall was their best veteran for the last decade, basically since he was a rookie. But John Wall was always injured, and John Wall has never been deep in the playoffs except for the one run where they were close to making it to the finals. John Wall hasn't been there. Westbrook has had more experience. He's had more of those opportunities. He knows what it takes to be in a conference final and lose, of course, but he's always been there. So I think he brings something they've been missing to help them get over that hump, because to me, the franchise as a whole needs to have more of a championship style mindset versus just trying to make the playoffs mindset. That's two different ball games we're talking. So I think they're pretty sold on him. I think in my opinion, if anything, I could see, unfortunately, Beal being moved. It's a shame. He's in the prime of his career, and you hate to see how much he is, in a sense, wasted. He should be on a team that's competing for championships. So if he's moved, they might be bringing in some other players, because you can get a lot for Beal, and try to help build with Westbrook as almost the leader of the team, similar to what we're seeing some other teams like the Sixers now having, and leaders and veterans with like a Dwight Howard or Danny Green. You need those voices that have been there. And they finally, I think, are getting that at least. Because even Robin Lopez is another one that's a good example.
Robin Lopez is a great example as well. I think exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Russell Westbrook, he's heavily criticized. Not a lot of it is his fault. All he's done throughout his career is put up great numbers. But you mentioned, kind of the influence and the culture that he brings, just the culture of consistency, always being there, always being available. I think that's a huge part of Westbrook there. And even the connection between him and Scotty Brooks from OKC, it's just kind of built. They already have that trust instilled there.
Good point.
So, that's a great point. And, I do. I hope the best. It's part of me wants to see Beal in a winning situation, but part of me wants to see, his loyalty to Washington, D.C. pay off and then build a winning team around him and not have to switch teams, like this day in the NBA, everybody's switching teams. There's not much loyalty there, and rightfully so. You gotta do what you got to do to win. And if your organization isn't doing it, then you got to get out of there. So you mentioned Bradley Beal, all the accolades, leads the league in scoring by a significant margin, about 4 points a game. Led the NBA All-Star voting for shooting guards. We kind of talked about what he means to Washington, but what is it going to take for him to, that monumental piece? Do you see it happening before the trade deadline, or is it going to be something after the season where they kind of just reach the point where, you mentioned the package that you'd potentially get back. You're looking at, draft picks and, significant players. You're going to get a couple decent players as well. Could you see that? Could you see it getting to the point where the return is more overwhelming to the team to where it is worth it for both sides to move on?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the tough part is it depends on who they could get. I imagine that moving Bradley Beal, you would be able to get draft picks and a few players out of it. But also, I don't know that I hate to say this, but they need to be very specific in who they're bringing in. And I don't know that it's going to work out that way anyways, which is why I think it's better for the Wizards to keep Beal and try to bring in pieces. Now, what I've been saying since the summer, the pieces that they don't need rookies. They don't need young guys. They need seasoned players. Any rookie that you bring in needs to be able to come right in. And Denny Adija does a good job, and Rui did a good job as a rookie last year. He's a good young player. But they need some players that are going to come in, that have that experience, what Westbrook and Lopez bring. Because the crazy thing is, for those that don't realize, is when you look across the roster of the Wizards, look at how many of those players have actively been in rotation for a full season for more than like 2 years. You know, I'm talking guys that have started, guys that were six-man. They don't have that. They don't have that at all. A lot of these players are either in their first or second year, and if they did come into the team, someone like Jerome Robinson, they're coming in after being a true bench player, a role player in that sense. You don't have players coming in that have had significant minutes. So they don't have that experience. They don't know what it's like to play in a starting role or a main rotation throughout the course of the season. And now you're asking them to do that. Mo Wagner, Isak Bonga, you're asking these guys to be starters and in the main rotation when they really probably should be like the 9th or 10th man on the roster. So you're asking more from what they should be doing. So they need to bring in players that are going to help. If they're not a true starter, at least be that 6th or 7th man that's going to come right in and be able to just kind of hit the ground running. There's really no time for teaching and learning, because I think a team like the Wizards versus teams like the Warriors are actually even doing it right now with Wiseman, and they're doing a really good job of molding the younger group. But when you don't have those vets like a Draymond Green and a Steph Curry, LeBron, I'm trying to think of who else I can even compare it to. The Clippers have it, of course, with Kawhi and Paul George, but they're not the most vocal. If you don't have those vets that have been in the biggest stretches of the season, you need to bring in you need to bring that in. And it doesn't have to be, when I say vets, I don't mean just the top talent. Like I look at the Sixers, for example, with Dwight and Danny Green and Seth Curry. Those are players that know what it takes to be successful. It doesn't always have to be the player that's at the top of the league. Bring in a Seth Curry. Bring in a player that's going to come in and be able to teach the guys around him. So if I'm looking, that's what they need to be bringing in. Find it, whether it's through a trade, free agents, whatever it is. I don't know. I'm never great with the logistics of those details. But find someone that is looking to make a move. I remember like Hassan Whiteside was available in free agency in the summer. Like those types of players that are on a team that they're not going to really reach potential. They're not going to really be a championship caliber team. And then you can come in and help the Wizards get over that hump.
Exactly. And you mentioned the Sixers. I think the Wizards are at what I would like to call a crossroads where, kind of, similar to the Sixers after this past season, getting swept by the Celtics in the first round. A lot of people were talking like, is this going to work with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons? It's a little different, but they're talking about, selling one of their cornerstones for, the future. And, I think that's kind of where the Wizards are. They need to decide, is Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal your guys to build around? And if so, go out, get those veteran pieces, do what you have to do, make a few trades that might, hurt, some of those draft picks, some of that draft capital that you have. Because you got to build for something eventually. You can't just keep collecting draft capital and bringing in rookies and going through that rotation. You eventually got to open the door to something experienced and, hope to win something. So,
but that's a good point because I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's a great point because the Wizards to me are a lot like where the Sixers were. But what did it take? Look at last year, this year. What changed? You still have your big players, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons. You bring in Shake Milton's a great young player for them. You bring in a new head coach who honestly bringing in Doc, who's one of the best coaches that were available. That in itself was a huge boost. He's been deep in the playoffs, deep in the season. He's a coach that's going to help hold players accountable, help get these guys on the right track. You bring in pieces like Seth and Dwight and Danny Green, as we mentioned, a great rookie in Tyrese Maxey. I mean, these are the pieces that the Wizards actually need too. It's a similar struggle. They need those pieces that can work around Beal and Westbrook to bring in a third. Like Tobias Harris, in my opinion, does not get enough credit for the Sixers. But you need a piece like that. Who's the Tobias Harris of the Wizards? Is it Rui? Is it Davis Bertans? You don't really know. Need. I mean, Scott Brooks, it does lead to the question of, can they do it with him as head coach? I don't know, to be honest. Sometimes it might not even be him not being a great coach as much as it might just be time for a new voice. Like Doug Peterson like Brett Brown in Philly. Sometimes it's just time for a new voice to be, to mix things up a little with a different perspective. So a lot that could be changed. And I don't think Beal is the answer first. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think whenever you're working with supreme talent like Beal, you try to fix other things. You mentioned the Eagles; they tried to kind of move around Doug Peterson, get him out of there. Obviously, that didn't help with the Carson Wentz situation, but I think when you have your franchise guy who you consider is the franchise cornerstone, you got to try some other avenues before you give up on him. Especially with a guy like Beal, who is, he's getting the accolades. He's at the top of the NBA right now as far as player in results. It's just the winning aspect that we got to get him around to. But we'll move on. I did just want to mention a quick tweet that you sent out last week. You were kind of comparing Donovan Mitchell to the situations of, CP3, who was stuck in New Orleans for a while. You also mentioned, Derrick Rose as well. Kind of how he had hit the pinnacle of the NBA and still has never reached that, team pinnacle of getting to the finals or winning a championship. I was just wondering, kind of elaborate on that. Do you look at the Jazz? Do you look at Donovan Mitchell as somebody who is kind of stuck in not a bad situation, obviously, but a situation where it's going to be hard to get over that hump? You got to hope that LeBron retires soon if you're in the West. But
not
just kind of elaborate. What was that?
I said, not for me as a LeBron fan. Watch it.
No. I'm just saying.
They do. I get what you're saying.
I'm just saying for Donovan Mitchell.
Much like Tom Brady in the NFL and everyone in the NBA is definitely like, when is this guy going to retire? Get out of here. We're tired of you.
It's craziness. He's getting better. It's weird.
No, Wayne Wade was saying that. And I'm like, actually, I think I agree. His game is developing in a way that he's actually playing better. He's playing smarter. His perimeter game gets stronger. I'm like, this man's aging in reverse.
He's basically preserving his body because, like you said, he's getting more efficient in his perimeter game, and that's going to give him even more years. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So short term, there's no short solution for teams like the Jazz because the Lakers are going to be around for a while. The Clippers are going to be around for a while. But that's what I was comparing. And actually, ironically, as we talk about the Wizards, Bradley Beal's in a similar situation. The biggest difference is the Jazz make the playoffs. They're not getting past the first round. So is that much better? I think it gets to a point where we have to question, what is the standard? Like, if your goal is to just get to the playoffs every year, great, you're doing that. But if you're tired of playing all season to get knocked out in the first round, then you're gonna want something different. And I think about Derrick Rose, especially Derrick Rose before his ACL injuries. Granted, he's still a tremendous player. Chris Paul, he had a number of years where he's kind of been bounced around. He still hasn't been able to win a championship. He's still been dealing Clippers, Rockets, Pelicans coming in. He still has been from team to team trying to find a spot he can take that next step. And it might be Phoenix, Devin Booker. Like, there are so many players across the league that are on these teams that are great teams, usually that 7, 8 seed, maybe 9 just on the outside looking in. But when is enough? One is how Anthony Davis came to LA, how Paul George and Kawhi Leonard linked up. We now see, of course, in Brooklyn with James Harden, Kyrie, and KD, even though KD and Kyrie already have a championship. Those three coming together. You have to wonder how much more of that we're going to see. Chris Paul and Devin is a major, in Phoenix, that's a major connection. That group's a little underrated still. You have to wonder for players like Donovan Mitchell, if the Nuggets aren't able to get over that hump. So I was really just posing the question because of that. Of course, someone was like, they play nothing alike. I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not at all. I am strictly saying the situationships they're in are very similar. Like, they're never going to fully be able to win a championship. They're not going to get the ring, but they will be having a nice, comfortable season after season run. So I do. Donovan Mitchell is such a talented player, and you have to wonder, much like Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler was in a similar boat for a while until he found a home in Miami. Where would that home be? Is it moving out somewhere else, or is he going to stay there and be almost wasted in that sense?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it's a great question when you have a supreme talent, like stuck in situations, because what it comes down to for me is, and this is especially when you're negotiating future and future deals, is this going to make my team better than the top team? Am I going to be
Mhm.
better than the Lakers? Am I going to be better than the Brooklyn Nets? That's kind of it. The situation I'm at with the Sixers is, they're at the top of the East right now, but are they positioned to win a championship with their current roster? And obviously their starting five's undefeated, but you do have to kind of ask that question. These weaker aspects of the team and how to fix them, you would have to give up a little bit in other aspects. So
Mhm.
it's kind of that similar situation. When you're the Jazz, do you think? They lost to the Denver Nuggets last year, so they didn't even
Yeah.
get to play the Lakers.
Yep.
And
Yep.
you know what I mean? So are you positioned, are you positioned to beat Jokic in the Denver Nuggets? I don't think
Exactly.
they're better than the Denver Nuggets. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
when you're looking at a team and you're looking at a Jazz team that hasn't really added anything significant in the last 3 to 4 years since Donovan Mitchell's been there. It's been him and Gobert. You know what I mean? And they did add Mike Conley Jr., but
Yeah, but
you
that's
know
not enough.
it's not enough, and especially in the West, when you're going up against an AD and LeBron matchup. You got to look for something. And it's tough because you mentioned the logistics of things like that. I don't know what you could do in order to get better than the Lakers. It's that hard, but that's what creates this bleak
Yeah.
outlook for teams like the Jazz. You just don't
That's
know when you're going to get over that hump.
That's the thing. There are several teams that are in that boat. Like actually James Harden moving out of Houston. Houston now is a team that's competitive, but I don't foresee them being a team that's going to.
Right.
Although Christian Wood's very, very fun to watch. But I don't see
Yeah.
them being a championship caliber team. But you have to look across both conferences. You have teams. I'm even going to put the Milwaukee Bucks in that category.
Yeah.
They bring in someone like Drew Holiday, and that kind of like pacifies things, but it's not enough, in my opinion, for them to be better than now the Nets or the Sixers and even
Yeah.
the Celtics.
Yeah.
But there are those teams that they're doing well. They're having a good season. They're over 500. They're in the playoffs, but they don't. If you don't have what it takes to at least be able to compete, we're talking best of 7 series, be able to compete with the top 2 teams in your conference. It's time to start figuring something else out. Utah,
Yeah.
Denver, I think is getting there, but
Yeah.
they still are sitting at that number 3, 4 spot in the West. Some of these teams do need to figure out, is it worth it to either try to sell some pieces like Brooklyn just did and clean house and bring in
Yeah.
someone like James Harden, or do you try to just wait your time? I don't know. So I do
It's
think that we're
tough.
seeing a
Yeah.
change because, as you even mentioned in the beginning, more and more players are kind of like putting their foot down and taking that ownership. They want to be able to compete for a championship, and if you don't bring them in, I'm getting out type deal.
Yeah.
So it's putting some pressure on teams that they do need to start figuring it out. The Wizards, the Jazz, the Bucks, the Suns. Some of these
Yeah.
middle of the pack teams need to figure it out.
Yeah, because I think especially as a fan, watching these players grow, you start to see that window of them allowing an organization to fail. You start to see that window close, and it gets very scary as a fan. Just wondering when, for the Phoenix Suns, for example, when was Devin Booker gonna request that trade? Maybe he doesn't now
Right.
because they got CP3 there, but before then it looked like he was the only guy out there trying in Phoenix. And, he's the only guy sticking out. And you just wonder how long what does it take to push them over that hump to request a trade like Anthony Davis did?
Mm-hmm.
It's not that Anthony Davis hated the New Orleans organization. It just wasn't working. You're going, like you said, it's redundant. You just keep going to the same place and losing to the same teams and not getting to your goals. So you can't continue to do the same thing and expect different results.
Exactly.
So I think that's where a lot of teams are. We'll get through these next topics really quick. I know I'm burning up my time with you here. I wanted to get your opinion just on the All-Star game. Do you think that there should be an All-Star game? Is that a dumb idea? You saw LeBron came out and was like, that makes zero sense. It seems like a lot of the All-Stars won't even participate if they are voted in. How did you feel generally about that situation?
Ah, it's a shame. All-Star Weekend is always so exciting, and especially with all the recent changes they've put in to make it even more competitive and having them play for charities and everything. But a big part of All-Star Weekend is the fan engagement. And there's a lot that goes on, not even just within the games, but around the games, that makes All-Star Weekend a big event for all sports, reporters, coaches, players, they have different events and networking events, and they do a lot of stuff outside the game. I didn't even realize until I became a reporter that it's a weekend long celebration. It's networking, it's fun, it's games, spades,
Right.
games, tournaments going on, like all this other stuff you don't even know about that goes on outside of the actual all-star game. So I think if you're unable to have people in attendance, if you're unable to do it safely, if you're unable to figure out a way to minimize any risk, there is no point in doing it. I mean, you look at what football just did. Instead of having the Pro Bowl, having the esports tournament that they had, bringing in celebrities. I think esports right now is really growing. So they capitalize on that and try to use that as a way to still be engaging and have a way to highlight, those that would have been in the Pro Bowl. But the NBA is going to have to do the same, because definitely with it being an indoor sport in the wintertime, the travel that comes into it, all these different elements that make it even more dangerous. If the NFL couldn't have a Pro Bowl, I don't think that they can have the All-Star Weekend. It's just
Right.
no way to safely do it. I know they're talking about having it in Atlanta, since Turner Sports is down there, which houses like NBA TV and everything, but I don't think there's a way to safely do it. And we know players have been putting their foot down, saying like, I'm not risking my health mid-season just to go entertain you guys. So I don't think the NBA All-Star Weekend is going to happen. I know I'm getting, from the media side, I'm getting different notifications and stuff about it, but I don't actually see it happening. And if it does happen, I don't think it. I mean, we have to keep in mind for All-Star Weekend, it's not just of course we have the two captains that pick team. It's not just the game. You have celebrity game, the Rising Stars Challenge. You've got the 3-point shootout, the slam dunk contest, like all the different events. So that's a lot of people that have to come together to make it happen. Do you cut some of those and you just have the game? I mean, at that point, once you start cutting things away, you might as well just cut the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because
if it's coming from, my thinking is it's coming from the financial standpoint.
Right.
You want to build some revenue, some excitement around the league. Getting these guys together to perform and put on these shows. But once you start cutting out the dunk contest, the rookie, sophomore, the international game, once you start cutting that stuff out, then it's not All-Star Weekend anymore. You don't have the celebrities and the other players sitting on the sidelines.
Exactly.
You don't just get that pure enjoyment of it. So it's like, what's the point? When you see, in a game the other night with the Brooklyn Nets, Kevin Durant's getting pulled off the bench after playing 2 quarters, so it's stuff like that to where, it's already affecting the game anyways.
Exactly.
And now you're going to bring in, guys from, 30 teams across the United States to come play together and just contaminate the entire city of Atlanta. So
all the best from the league. I don't think, Also, the NFL is in a spot now, I feel like, where the cases were better. And they didn't even do one in person, but they at least had, and they still didn't do one in person. The NBA, as you mentioned, literally as recent as this past week with that debacle that was going on with Kevin Durant, there's still way too much going on. It's not under control. Some teams have started letting fans back in the arena, which I'm very surprised about. That seems careless, but we do know it's a business at the end of the day. Everything comes down to the bottom dollar, but my vote, don't have it.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. If a guy like LeBron is standing up and saying, like, what's going on, then I think, he kind of gives the pulse of the league and how players are feeling, how players are talking. Before I get you out of here, Renee, I do want to get your top 5 players in the league right now. I like to get it from every guest I get on the show just to kind of, keep the perspective, raw, because, I mean, this stuff varies. And I like to give the option, you don't have to pick who you think is the best player. You can pick your top 5 favorite players in the league right now, whatever you want to do. It's such a controversial topic. I don't put too much stipulations to it.
So I really actually did not come into this with any preconceived list. I'm going to go with LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Dennis Schroeder, Kyle Kuzma, and Alex Caruso. No,
you're a Lakers fan.
I'm just kidding.
Whoa, Dennis Schroeder. Okay.
Actually, all jokes aside, though, I got to give it up to that next group of talent that's really showing out. A player like Talon Horton-Tucker, Christian Wood, those guys that are really surprising people right now. They have been really fun to watch. James Wiseman. I mean, we all thought he was going to do well, but Halberton. I mean, there are some really good players.
Jeremy Grant up in Detroit. He's been balling.
In the bubble last year, I started saying keep an eye on him, and he is phenomenal. So, I think for most exciting players, I always love seeing those types of guys that are kind of those underrated players that come out of nowhere and catch everybody by surprise. I think talent-wise, I'm excited to see Tobias Harris actually going back to the Sixers, finally kind of stepping into his own. I felt like with Brett Brown and with the past systems the Sixers are running, it didn't really allow him to do what he did best. I think coming in, we expected him to be in the big three, and then he really didn't ever bring that until this season. Finally seeing him someone that's a closer for them and able to step up in big moments. Should be an all-star player, to be honest. So I'm going to go with him. Definitely LeBron, of course, because not even as a fan, but because of the fact that he is literally playing what could be his best basketball in his 18th season. That's insane. Oh, geez, I guess I should have thought of a list. I don't want to pick anybody from the Nets, just as a hater, to be honest. But I guess I would say Kyrie. I mean, coming off, as the pinnacle of that trio, I think he's going to be a big engine behind them having chemistry and being able to play well. And so far, it seems like he's actually been less Kyrie-like. He seems like he's been laying low a little bit lately.
Yeah, I like what I've seen from Kyrie lately. He's been balling and just kind of letting it go,
Yeah. So I'm going to go with him. Jaylen Brown, definitely.
Jaylen Brown, up and coming, man. Yeah.
Definitely been coming. I mean, I was thinking more Jason Tatum was going to be the one that was kind of rising for the Celtics, but it's been him. And then Steph. Gotta go with Steph. He's looking like both Splash Brothers right now. He's looking like him and Clay at one. I mean, the numbers he's putting up are
just had 57 the other night.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And then of course I gotta go with Bradley Beal. So that's 6 actually. I can count, I promise. That's 6. Gotta go with Bradley Beal. Him and Steph right now are shooting the lights out. I know Damian Lillard's been doing really a good job, especially since his twins were born, Daddy Dame. But I'm gonna go with Steph and Bradley Beal to close out my top 6.
Love it.
Always got to go above.
Love it. I cannot hate on that top 6. Got some of my favorite players in there as well. Renee, thank you so much for coming on the show once again. You have a plethora of knowledge here. I'm glad you got to share it with us today, bringing that Washington, D.C. aspect of things, but still with the ties to Philly and the greater Philadelphia area. So it was lovely to have you on the show. If you just want to update us of any new stuff you got going on, whatever you have coming out over the next couple weeks, just go ahead and plug yourself in, Renee.
Got a lot going on, actually. I will say, though, I do have this new organization I've created. It's a networking opportunity for anybody that's looking to connect with other professionals, learn, get support. It's called Planted Not Buried. So it's actually a Slack-run organization. So you can actually let me know if you're interested. I do have a lot going on, some events I'll be speaking at, some stuff that's going on the modeling side. So just follow me at Renee P. Wash on Twitter and Clubhouse, at Renee P. Washington on Instagram and Facebook. And you can keep up with all the updates that are going on because it's a lot I've got up my sleeves, so to speak. And even beyond the headlines, we've got some live shows coming up with some special guests from the WNBA and the NFL. So I'm excited for that. But Scotty, it's been a pleasure chatting with you about the NBA and what we just saw in the Super Bowl. And it's a lot going on right now. So it's great that we can have these conversations around sports again. It's been fun.
Exactly, Renee. And great times like these in the pandemic where we get to come together over StreamYard. So I appreciate you hopping on here with me, talking it out. Obviously that dismal Super Bowl mixed with the halftime performance. not doing anybody any favors, but you guys see Renee is plugged into the sports world. Definitely go give her a follow on all the social media platforms. Connect, chat it up, interact. Much love to you, Renee. Thank you once again for coming on the show. Everybody that tuned in today, thank you for watching once again, checking out Scotty Talks. Always appreciated. You can find me at Scotty Drowned on Twitter. That's my personal page. At ST Philly Sports 1 is the sports page. Appreciate all the viewership. Keep passing it around. And thank you once again, Renee. That's going to be it for this episode. Peace.